If there ever was a candidate in California's 48th Congressional District that embodies the greatest contrast from the longtime incumbent, that would be the one with the unusual name, Omar Siddiqui. Omar is one among a large group of Democrats, Independents, and Republicans trying to unseat longtime Congressman Dana Rohrabacher in one of California's wealthiest and most conservative districts. With his straightforward, no-nonsense style, Omar states unapologetically that he is the most qualified candidate ready to get to work on day one. His background and experiences read like a Jason Bourne novel filled with stories about the FBI, CIA, and White House. A trial attorney with a master's degree in engineering, an advisor to the FBI on national security and counterterrorism, and a partner with the CIA, no other candidate besides the incumbent can boast such credentials. We recently caught up to him and decided to see for ourselves what fuels this self-proclaimed advocate for truth and demystify the man behind that unusual name. With such an impressive resume, we asked him how that will help him in Congress.
I think of all of the candidates running for Congress right now, and as many people know, there's quite a few of them. I think what separates me from the others is that I have both the public and private sector experience. I'm ready to do this job on day one. There's no on-the-job training with me. I've met with presidents, I've met with the FBI director, I've met with the CIA director, I've met with secretaries of state. Acting as a congressman, being a congressman is not going to be new. I have this experience, I'm ready to go.
Omar's father immigrated to British India in the late 1950s and traveled to America on board the Queen Mary. Owning nothing but the clothes on his back and seeking a better life and education, he settled in Orange County, California, where Omar was born and raised. After high school, Omar attended USC and earned a master's degree in engineering. His fascination with Benjamin Franklin inspired him to continue his education, so he decided to become a lawyer and eventually start his own law firm. There are a lot of hot topics being debated in the country right now. So let's start with one of the biggest in our district at the moment, sanctuary states.
Sure.
What's your stance on that?
Well, I'm glad you asked that question because for this past week, I've been making the circuits through the various local city council meetings, trying to convince local city councils not to join the Trump administration's constitutional challenge of the Senate Bill 54, which addresses sanctuary states. My position is simply this. We cannot divide people. We cannot alienate people. Our country is not safer by creating division and separating families and creating a police state. Our country is safer when we're all working together. I've been making the circuits to all these city council meetings to emphasize to these cities, do not challenge Senate Bill 54. California is a beacon of hope. The United States is a beacon of hope, and we simply cannot alienate people. That does not benefit our country.
So then you support state rights over federal laws?
Well, I think it depends on what we're talking about. I think when we're talking about human rights issues, we have to make sure that the laws are just, whether they're federal or state. If we're talking about certain environmental laws, where you want federal preemption to supersede states influencing what environmental policy should be, well, that's a different story too. I think it's a case-by-case basis when it comes to the preemption issue of federal versus state laws. I don't think there's a clear-cut black and white answer there.
Okay, so then what about the legalization of marijuana? Do you, in that case, do you believe state versus federal, or?
Well, that's a great question too. I think states should be given the right to regulate marijuana. My position on marijuana is I think it should be legal. I think it's an industry that has significant health benefits. And I think the stigma of marijuana has to be overcome. And I think Orange County has done a great job of pioneering that.
Now, another big issue that we are facing, especially here in Costa Mesa, is sober living homes. I know so many cities have tried to fight against this, but there's ADA protections. So what can you as a congressman do to help the citizens of the 48th District over the mass amounts of sober living homes we're suffering through at the moment?
Sure. Well, I think we have to look at this from a bigger picture. Certainly you have residents who are scared of sober living homes because they're scared, is it going to bring crime in their area? Is it going to bring drugs in the area? What exactly is a sober living home going to do planted in the middle of a residential neighborhood? And that's scary for a lot of people, and that's very understandable. But at the same time, we cannot overlook the issue, which means we do need a place where people can go and get help and get medical treatment. The issue is, as an attorney, I can say that there's a lot of crimes you see, such as DUIs, for example, and people end up in jail. But after several days in jail, they get out and their problem's not solved. There's no rehabilitation. So my position on sober living homes is I understand the concern over them. But I think what we need to do is we need to find a solution. And what I will do in Congress is I will work very closely with local and state officials to make sure that we set up these rehabilitation centers, which are necessary and very helpful. We need them, but make sure we design for them and put them in areas that alleviate any local concerns.
What about, I know a lot of these sober living homes, one of the things they are doing is somebody's insurance runs out or they have a dirty drug test, so they just kick them out. So they're coming to the 48th District from out of state, and now they're homeless on our streets with no way home.
I think you hit it right on the head, is because I think a lot of times these sober living homes are starting to put profits before their patients, right? Putting profits before what the function of these sober living homes should be. And that is what needs to change. We have to make sure that whenever someone gets access to a sober living home, they're helped. They're getting the treatment. And if for some reason they're no longer able to afford that home, or there's some other issue that prevents them from being able to stay there, that there must be a solution crafted for someplace else for them to go. They cannot just be left to the street. So yes, you hit it on the head. I think that's exactly what needs to happen. We need to craft legislation both at the federal and the state level to ensure that these patients are given the treatment they need and they're not simply kicked out for a lack of payment or any other issue. We need to get them help.
What are the biggest complaints you're hearing out there on the campaign trail for both the 48th District and the states, and how do you plan on addressing them?
Well, thank you. Well, the biggest complaint that we're getting as we're blazing the campaign trail is Congressman Dana Rohrabacher himself. He's been a fixture of Orange County for 30 years now, and he's out of touch and out of tune with the district. He doesn't understand the district's concern for environmental policy. He doesn't understand the concern that the district has over his policies of favoring Russia over the district. He has held more meetings outside the district with Putin and others than spending time with his own district and hearing out his constituents. And that's not what a representative should do. What I plan on doing is I plan on making sure that when we win this election, we are going to stay in solid touch. We're going to stay in great touch with the community here and make sure all of their voices are heard. Not just the voices that agree with us, but all of the voices that have issue.
Now, you mentioned his work with Russia, but isn't that part of his job as, he works on national security issues in Congress? Wouldn't he have to be in touch with Russia?
Well, not necessarily. There's one thing to be in touch with Russia for the purpose of congressional relations, but there's another thing to be rogue about it. It's another thing to have getting paid by Russia. As you may recall, there was a Washington Post article indicating that the House Majority Leader Kevin McCarthy was indicating that he thinks that there's two people that Putin's been paying, Rohrabacher and Trump.
I do remember that.
Right? That is certainly beyond the scope of his congressional duties. And of course, when the other congressmen laughed at it, Kevin McCarthy was very adamant that it was true. Going one step further, even the FBI warned Rohrabacher that Russia, the Kremlin, considered him such an asset that they even had, the Kremlin had a code name for him. That is a problem. Congressman Rohrabacher is ignoring our own intelligence community's warnings that he is aiding and abetting Russia.
In a lot of cities and counties and school districts across California, we have a large unfunded pension liability. As a congressman, what can you do to address this?
Sure. Well, I think that's a great question. And the problem that we have right now is, how are people going to focus on jobs and retirement, not knowing what their future is going to be? And I think we need to craft legislation to ensure that these pensions are in fact secure, so people know that once their career is over, what their future stable income is going to be. A lot of people cannot live off Social Security alone. That's not enough. We need to be able to provide incentives to these prospective employees, saying like, put in your time, put in your dedication to your job, and do not worry, there will be a pension waiting for you for your dedicated service to our country, our state. And as such, in Congress, I am going to craft legislation that gives them that security, that gives them that assurance that, don't worry, when you have put in that time, there is something that's there for you at the end. And that's the right thing to do.
In this congressional race, top-heavy with Democratic candidates, Omar has a unique challenge. Because of his foreign-sounding name, many of his fellow Democrats have urged him to drop out of the race for the good of the party. Channeling the words of former President Obama, he had this response.
Yes, we can. I'm not dropping out because of my name. I'm not dropping out because of who I am. I want you to vote for me because of my character, my background, and what I've done. There's been one major obstacle that's been a challenge for me. And that is my name and my background, my heritage. I'm an Orange County native. The irony of it is I was born and raised here in Orange County all 46 years of my life. In fact, of all of the candidates, I've been here the longest. So I'm not even an immigrant. I'm local. I'm native. But I get pigeonholed as being, because of my name, because of my heritage, I'm questioned in regards to my allegiance to our country. Even though I serve as an FBI Director of Special Projects for the National Citizens Academy, I still get questioned about my allegiance to our country, which isn't right, isn't fair, and it's very challenging to go through. For example, very recently, someone made mention to me that by all means, you are the most experienced, you're the most qualified, there is no contest between you and the other candidates. But you should drop out of the race for one reason and one reason alone. That's because your name. No one will vote for someone with your name. And I really can't change that. And that's actually a conversation I had with President Obama once. And his comment to me was, look, whenever someone tells you to step aside or that you shouldn't try, just remember, yes, we can. Move forward. He recalls that not a day went by that someone didn't remind him of him being African American, or that his middle name was Hussein, or his last name rhymes with Osama, or his family was Kenyan Muslim. But he didn't listen to that. He knew, our country was better than that. It's not the dream of Martin Luther King to be judged by the color of our skin, but rather the content of our character. And that's why I'm out there every day. That's why I'm going to work extra hard to say, look, yes, my name is Omar Siddiqui, but look, I'm on the front lines of national security. I'm on the front lines of keeping our country safe. I'm on the front lines of making sure that every American has an opportunity to be who they are, regardless of the color of their skin, their national origin, their race, their gender, their sexual orientation.
So your winning this campaign would actually be a huge step forward for a lot of minorities out there.
And that's a major, major facet that we're also championing as well right now. Of course, we're trying to appeal to the no party preference. We're trying to appeal to the Republican base, but we're also doing something that no other campaign is doing, is we're reaching out to persons of color and the minorities in our district, which aren't necessarily a minority. They're over 42 some odd percent. Our district includes Westminster, parts of Garden Grove, Fountain Valley, which has one of the largest South Asian population, as you know, the Little Saigon area. Also, not to be forgotten, can never be forgotten, are the Latinx communities in Costa Mesa, parts of Santa Ana, that Huntington Beach, that comprise a major part of our voting bloc. And when we've approached these communities, a lot of their response has been, no one's come here to talk to us. No one's come here to campaign for us. I am the only candidate that's showed up at these city council meetings to fight and argue in favor of SB 54. And my position is, look, it may not be the popular thing one way or the other, but it's the right thing. And I'm going to stand up for what's right. Right is right, regardless of the number of people that are against it.
So you really are fighting for a lot of these minorities. I know you were recently at the Huntington Beach City Council meeting. How did that work out?
That was a rough night. That was a rough night. We had it was a packed city council. We had over 150 plus anti-immigration, anti-SB 54. We had a lot of hate.
I strongly urge the council, please reconsider today's action and vote down.
He has 20 seconds left.
Playing politics with people's lives puts the community at risk. Let the great heroes of the Huntington Beach Police Department do their jobs to keep our city safe and not have to serve as ICE officers.
Even as I was speaking that night, in the middle of my addressing city council, we were heckled, we were yelled at. City council, unfortunately, seemed to have lost control over the meeting itself. People were yelling and screaming at will when they wanted to. It was just a very, very challenging night. But I will do it over and over and over and over and over again. Why? Because that's what our mission is. Again, like I said, we're not going to show up only where it's donuts and coffee and smiles. We're going to fight where it's challenging. And I made it a point to meet with everyone and listen to everyone, even those who came all the way from Arizona to advocate and fight against SB 54. And I listened to them. And you can imagine, they were trying to intimidate and harass a lot of people in that room, but we weren't going to have it. And we stood strong. They did everything in their power to intimidate, influence, and spread hate. But in honor of Martin Luther King, you don't combat hate with hate. You combat it with love. And so we spoke to them in peace and tried to listen to what they had to say. But yeah, it was a tough night. But again, I'm glad we were there.
You mentioned people from Arizona came all the way to a city council meeting in another state.
Yes, yes. You had people that were coming in buses from different states to advocate and push the cause of immigration to try to ensure that California does not become a sanctuary state. It's become that serious. They had big Trump flags. They had a lot of hate, unfortunately, to the immigrant community. And I think what was important for us is to communicate, do not demonize immigrants. Do not divide our country. Once we head down that path, once we head down that dark path, there's no coming back when we start demonizing immigrants, good immigrants versus bad immigrants. That becomes an unstable society. That creates an unstable government. That creates an unstable country. That's an issue of national security.
Something we were interested in knowing is his position on the Hillary Clinton email server scandal that continues to consume so much news today. We stated, had anyone else done a fraction of what Hillary did, he or she would be debriefed, fined, and jailed. So how did she get away with it?
Yeah, well, I get asked this question a lot, especially because Director Comey gets blamed a lot for making his announcement at the timing when he did. My comment to this would be, well, it's true that a lot of times from the outside, it appears that if you have done something, that you should suffer certain consequences. But you have to remember the FBI works objectively without interference politically. Or at least that's what it's supposed to be. And so when you have issues like this internally, the FBI doesn't look at who's who. We look at what was done and what the evidence indicates. And based on this particular case, what I can share is that the government, the FBI felt that there was not enough evidence to substantiate anything of a criminal nature. Yes, there are a lot of people who think, well, that's a double standard. How come that standard applies to Hillary Clinton, but that standard wouldn't apply to any other employee who would maybe even be jailed or fined? And that's a fair assessment. That's a fair question. But remember, you have to look at each case separately and apart and evaluate the evidence in each case.
What prompted you to run?
Great question. Well, there was a few steps that got me from being a lawyer and owning a law firm to my work with the FBI to actually running for office. In a nutshell, I was the attorney representing a local religious center here in Orange County that uncovered President Bush's Operation Flex spy program. Essentially what happened was there was a local Islamic center here in Irvine, and just like any other church or mosque or synagogue, you have people that are interested in religion. But this one individual came to the Islamic center, and instead of wanting to learn about beliefs and theology, he started making comments that he was going to do another terrorist act here in the United States. He had been making rhetoric that he had been in touch with Osama bin Laden. Of course, the local congregation was very concerned about this. They contacted the lawyers, and our response, of course, was, hopefully this guy is just a nut, but just in case he's not, he must be reported to law enforcement. So we did report him to law enforcement. He was reported to the local police department and the FBI. But as it turns out, this guy was not a nut. As it turns out, he was actually an undercover paid informant sent to the center under President George Bush's Operation Flex program. So essentially what we did is we were the attorneys responsible. I was the attorney responsible for opening up this issue and derailing President Bush's unconstitutional program. That led to a series of events that prompted the FBI and the White House to reach out to me, to engage me to work with the government as a first line of defense to protect our country and also work and engage the community to serve as a first line of defense. So in 2010, I was recruited to work with the FBI on national security matters, and so I've been doing that for almost 9+ years now. From that, working with the government, the joke that I would have with a lot of the FBI assistant directors would, we saved the world once, the government wants you to do it again, is I was venting with President Obama in November of 2016 about the state of our country and how this candidate Trump is talking about building walls and dividing people and banning people from coming into our country just because of their name or their national origin. And President Obama, he let me go on for several minutes before he finally said, you know what, stop. What are you going to do about it? You changed FBI policy from the outside, entire FBI policy from the outside. What are you going to do to change what you're complaining about? No one cares about the law firm or wealth or bank. No one cares about any of that. People will remember for what you've done for your country. And that was a big motivation for me. But still, I was praying on it, thinking of it, which brings me up to 1 year ago, April of 2017. I had a meeting with FBI Director Comey, and I told him, President Obama thinks I should run for office. What do you think? And his response was, you know what, there's no time to stand around. Do something. There's no time to stand around. And I was contemplating that, but I told Dr. Comey, I'm still thinking about it, but what I wanted him to know was about this program I was putting together called the Diversity Agent Recruitment Event that I was co-hosting with the local FBI field office. And what this event was, it was trying to get more minorities and diversity into the FBI, more women, Muslim, Arab, Jewish, Korean, into the FBI. But the problem I was having is a lot of these prospective applicants were looking at this as being Trump's FBI, no longer diversity. When Director Comey heard that, he was not happy with that. He knows, we know, that diversity is a critical part of our national security. Diversity is critical for our FBI's mission. So as a result, Director Comey said, I am going to come to Los Angeles to attend the diversity agent recruitment event, which was great. I had a meeting with him at 4:30. I was going to be a part of the program. I'm literally on my way to the event in May. I was very excited. The local field office was excited that the director's coming to Los Angeles to attend this critical event. And as I'm on my way to the event, my phone starts buzzing. Is the event still going on? I'm like, well, why wouldn't it be? Well, because President Trump has just fired Director Comey. So a lot of people wonder, well, what was Director Comey being, why was Director Comey in LA when he was being fired? Well, that's why. He was here in part to attend that diversity agent recruitment event that I was co-hosting. And that, to me, sitting on the side of the freeway, trying to draw in all of these experiences and conversations with the president and Director Comey, it hit me that truly there is no time for me to stand around. And that's what prompted me at that moment to say, you know what, I am now going to stand up. I'm now going to do something.
So now what committees do you hope to join once you're elected?
There are a lot of committees that I would love to be a part of. One of them is obviously the House Intelligence Committee. I want to foster a better working relationship between Congress and the FBI and the CIA, which I've been a part of. I also would love to be a part of the Judiciary Committee to enable, if possible and if popular, to consider articles of impeachment for President Trump.
Now, I know we touched on Rohrabacher already, but we do have a lot of supporters here in Costa Mesa and 48th District in general. So why should his previous voters vote for you instead of him?
Well, because one thing that I will do is I will bring stability, integrity, and respect back to this position. I think, unfortunately, when you think of a representative, you want someone that's championing your voice, championing our issues in Congress. And I think that's what Rohrabacher's issue has been the last several years. No one feels in touch with him. In fact, on one of the doors that we were knocking as we're campaigning, one nice lady said, oh, well, I've voted for Dana Rohrabacher for years because I think we need a woman like Dana in office. And I guess she didn't realize that the name Dana was actually male in this circumstance. And so you can see how out of touch he's been. What I will say to the voters out there is you need a congressman who is ready on day one, who has both the public and private sector experience. When you apply for a job, when anyone applies for a job, you submit a resume. And on that resume, you look at one's education, you look at one's experience, you look at what they can bring to the table. And I will tell the voters, if you compare all of the resumes, you will find that my resume, my experience, our background is unmatched and unparalleled. And we can truly bring change to our district that's badly needed.